You're watching Are You Bored? The show that started out on FM radio is now here on whatever you're watching it on. And in today's episode, we're talking to Jamie from Stonemaier Games.
I got into board games in two different ways. When I was a kid, my parents exposed me to games, parents and friends exposed me to games from a pretty young age. I was playing games like chess and Scotland Yard based in kind of your area of the world, Risk, Millborn, Labyrinth, all sorts of games, a pretty wide variety. And I love that. And then as an adult, I returned to games in my 20s and enjoyed Catan and Agricola. And then I started getting deeper and deeper into the hobby. And the whole time I was also, even as a kid, I was designing games. And then I returned as an adult to start designing games as a little bit more than a hobby.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with this lockdown that's been worldwide, I know board games were getting really popular. They call them over here designer board games. So it's kind of like Monopoly, isn't it? A designer board games. But games that you're involved in, like Wingspan, that's been a massive success, hasn't it, Wingspan?
It has. Yeah, that's a game that we released about a year and a half ago. And I've been really happy to see how the gaming world has embraced it, but also the birder world. There are lots of birders out there that I wasn't aware of that are willing to try a fairly medium weight designer board game. Yeah.
Yeah, we've not been able to pick up a copy of it yet because it's sold out. It's sold out in England. We're having trouble getting it. So that shows that is good success. If something's sold out, it's not stuck on the shelves. It's flown off, hasn't it? Straight away, flown off. There's a joke there with birds. So
yeah, that is exciting to hear. Yeah, hopefully you'll be able to get a copy soon.
So that's just one of your many successes.
Yeah, Wingspan is probably our number one game right now, but we also have a game called Scythe that was on Kickstarter a few years ago. We ended up continually reprinting it. I think we just started the 22nd printing of this game. Yeah. So we've reprinted it many, many times at this point. And it's a bit more based in fiction than Wingspan, where Scythe is based in an alternate history, 1920s, kind of the middle of Europe or Eastern Europe, Poland and Russia and Germany. Or fictional versions, alternate universe versions of those countries. Have you played Scythe?
No, we've not played it yet. That's lovely. See, me and the wife, we only got into the hobby because we're 50. Well, I'm 50. The wife's nearly 50. She'll tell me off for telling her age out on air. But we only really got into these board games last year, and we decided that we wanted to spend a bit more family time with our daughter and grandchildren and stuff like that, because I think nowadays going more analog, it's getting the kids off the computers and having something more tactile in front of you. It takes us back to when we were younger. I know there was a lot of board games back then, but they weren't these type of board games with depth. These board games now, I think, although children can play them, and like I said, we encourage them to play them, I think they're more adult orientated.
They are, yeah. I think there's a lot of fun in the decisions you make in games, and like you said, the depth of them, the amount of agency, the amount of control you have over your choices in these games. But also, there's a lot of interesting stories you can tell through the games. And for kids, especially, we have some games where they're not designed for kids, but they teach skills like how to communicate better with people in cooperative games or games where you're working with a partner as you play. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. It's like when my grandson Harrison, he's not very old, but we were like encouraging him to play. And it's like when you're playing a game that's got DC on it with the superheroes.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of like sucks them in a bit, doesn't it? And that's the thing. Similar with Wingspan, how you say that's brought people in that are interested in birds. And it's brought those into the board game, hasn't it? So it's quite amazing.
One of the things that I was Go ahead.
And one thing leads to another, isn't it?
It does, yeah. That's been a very pleasant surprise for Wingspan, and it's been neat to see how, like the first Wingspan, the core box is based on North American birds, but right away we had people asking for birds from their areas. For birds, our first expansion was based in Europe, so we have a bunch of birds that Europeans are familiar with. Our next expansion's in Australia and New Zealand, so everyone has their own birds that they're used to seeing every day or that they're that are known for their regions. So even non-birders, just have birds that they're looking forward to seeing in this game.
Yeah, it almost becomes like it's a hobby within a hobby, because you have the base game, and the base game you can play fine, but you get the fans of that base game, and then they want expansions and more expansions and more expansions, because they love it that much, and it almost becomes, like I said, a hobby within a hobby, and which is good.
Yeah. It's great to see that. I love to see people going deep into a certain board game. Have you done that? Have you found one game where you love it so much that you've expanded it through expansions or accessories, things like that?
Yeah, it was the DC one. I think it gets a lot of flack, actually, DC deck building game. But we started off with something that someone said was easy.
Yeah.
And we get like grandchildren involved and stuff like that. And we started off with that. And then we've gone on to Marvel Champions. And like I said, we were trying to get a copy of Wingspan, but you couldn't get one in England for love nor money. So, because the wife, she's a big fan of like bird watching and stuff like that, so it ticked all the boxes. But I think it seems to be, like I said, since the lockdown, people went mad buying board games.
Yeah, we definitely saw sales go up during. I mean, we're still seeing that happen as people find ways to connect with each other, even though they can't leave their homes, and they're trying to self-isolate and stay safe. So I love that board games are able to facilitate that safe environment for interacting with people and having fun together.
I think that's what you're doing as well, because you always seem to put solo modes in your games, don't you?
We do, yeah. Most of our games have a robust, we call it automa. So it's kind of it feels like you're playing against an intelligent opponent, even though it is just a series of cards in the game.
Yeah, but it does. You can hear the dog scratching in the background here. We've got a basset. So
maybe he can smell my cat in the background here.
He probably can. He's smelling something here. What are you doing there, Boris? Come on. So, but yeah. So what have you got planned in the future, game-wise? Is there something you can let us know about? Something that's coming out soon that will be hitting the shelves in the UK or?
The next two, well, we have three things. One is a game that we recently finished our pre-order for, and we're now shipping to pre-order customers, and it will be on shelves on October 2nd. And that is a game called Pendulum, which is a game that uses time in some interesting ways, where you have some stand timers in the game. You're placing workers on the board, and depending on how long the timer is associated with that action, it determines how good the benefit is and how long that worker needs to stay on that place on the board. Yeah. So that's our only new game of 2020, and that'll be out on October 2nd.
What have you got planned for 2021? Have you got any exclusives that you can let us in on? Or is it top secret?
I do have one little thing that I've started to say a little bit, not officially, but on fun recordings like this, which is at the beginning of the pandemic, just for fun, I created a game. It was called a roll and write game. Are you familiar with that genre?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a roll and write game is where usually one person, it doesn't matter who, is rolling some dice, and then everyone chooses to use those two dice in some way, usually writing down on a piece of paper, like the number 6 and the number 2 in certain spots, and that means something. Yeah. And the nice thing about many roll and write games is that you can play on Zoom. I could play with you right now, many different roll and write games. So I created one to share with people at the beginning of the pandemic, just as a way of helping people play games remotely. And it got enough traction that I decided to actually print it. So one of our games of 2021 will be a printed fancy version of this game called Rolling Realms.
See, I think you've touched on something there with board games and this type of thing, that people don't have to be in the same room to play these type of things. But I think it's also good for the mental health.
Absolutely. Yeah, both the ability to think creatively and solve problems in a way that is fairly low stakes. Like you might save the world in a board game, or you might fail at saving the world, and that's okay. It's just a game. But you can also connect with people. I've used these games to connect with relatives, with friends and family around the country. In fact, many of the game nights that I host now are virtual, or they are all virtual, and I have friends from around the country who are able to join them, whereas they weren't able to join my weekly game night before the pandemic.
Yeah, so that is a good thing, and like looking towards when the pandemic is over, when people go back to normality, whatever that normality is, it is getting people to socialise. We think board games, because these definitely in England we have seen these places pop up, board game shops, and they weren't there the last few years. I think it's only in the last year or so, 2 years maybe, that we've seen these places pop up. And they're becoming almost community hubs. And I think they attract a lot of young people. I think that's a good thing because they're going playing games, they're socialising, so they're not in the bedrooms, and also they're not underage drinking. They're going to these games nights, whether it be Magic or they're playing one of your board games there. So I think that is a very good thing. I think it's a positive thing.
Absolutely. I love that about both board game shops, but also board game cafes. The concept of board game cafe is very new, where it's less based around selling games and more about come here and play. They have a big, collection of games, and you can come there and you can have a fun drink, a fun dish to eat, and you can choose a game and learn a game. Sometimes, like we have one in St. Louis where they will teach you the game, any game that you pull off their shelves. The staff there is there so that they can teach you how to play the game as well. I think that's great.
I know there's one that opened up in my old hometown. I don't live there now, Northwich, and I know that there was one that opened up there. I think it was just last year, the end of last year. So it is. We've got the parrot going off now. It's like we've got got a zoo here. So you can tell we're really professional. But yeah. So. You can see that it's taking off, and I think it's a good trend because, as I've said, I think a lot of things. And don't get me wrong, I've been just as bad for computer games. I've always played computer games, but I do seem to be having less stress. I think it's a less stressful hobby to play the board games than playing on a computer game. I don't know why that is. I don't know if you find that yourself.
I definitely find that to be true. Yeah. I think part of it is the interacting with people in person. I think part of it is, you mentioned the tactile nature of games, how you're actually touching things instead of just your keyboard and your mouse or your controller. And also, I don't know about you, but I spend pretty much all day at work in front of a computer. It's so nice to be able to turn off that screen and look at anything other than a screen for a little while. And board games provide that outlet.
I am with you on that because I do a lot of writing, and sometimes I'm just glad for shut that laptop down and go do something else. And not for put the PlayStation on or something like that. I think you can get eye strain. I think especially when you're older. So it is that more relaxing thing. And like I said, and the family time, and even if you are on your own, the solo gaming.
Right. And there's a great actually solo gaming community. So even though a lot of people are playing games by themselves and having that fun challenge, it's a creative challenge, like when you play a computer game, they are then connecting with people online who are also playing those same challenges and sharing their stories together. So even playing alone, they ended up connecting with people, which I think is really neat.
Yeah. See, this is what we started on our radio show, because we're on every week, well, twice weekly. We talk about things that we've done. And not that we do that many interesting things. So basically, we just talked and we're telling people about board games. And
that's great.
We got some feedback on that, and people liked it. So we haven't got a massive collection. So it's just something that we aim to do more of. While we're getting the good feedback, we're thinking if we can introduce people to this hobby.
That's wonderful.
It's a fun thing to talk about, and like it's always nice to have a hobby, isn't it? So,
yeah.
So what board games would you recommend? And you can recommend your own. What would you say?
Well, for someone who's getting into board games for the first time, let's see. There are a lot of games that I love. I'll just mention a few that come off the top of my head. There's a wonderful game called Sagrada. Have you played Sagrada?
Is it the one with the dice, coloured dice?
Colored dice, and kind of a stained glass theme.
Yes.
Where you're creating these stained glass windows with colored dice. Really beautiful game, really easy to learn and play. I think that's a great introductory game. That's a competitive game. I also think cooperative games where you're all working together against the game itself, or just working together in some way, they can be a great way to introduce games to new people. And one that I've enjoyed in that aspect that's really easy to learn is a game called The Mind. The Mind is a game where you can't communicate with other players, and you're essentially just trying to play cards in a specific order, but without communicating. So you're learning how other players you're basically learning about other players, how fast other players are going to play cards, but together, you're playing that together. And Just One. Have you played Just One?
No. We have played some cooperative games. I'm trying to think. I think Marvel Champions was one. And the other one was Elder Sign.
Elder Sign, yeah, that's a good cooperative game, yeah.
Yeah, that was one that we played. But like I said, it's what was on the shelves at the time.
Right. Well, you mentioned some great games by choosing games by theme. If you love DC Comics, Marvel Comics, there are a range of games in those worlds. The Lord of the Rings world, there's Star Wars games. I think that's a great way to connect with the game at first as well. I have named no games that we publish, but we've mentioned Wingspan enough. I think Wingspan is a great game that people
name some that you publish, because I know that our listeners will be interested. I know they will. Get them games out there. What would you say for our listeners? What game of yours should they start with? Apart from Wingspan, we've covered that already.
Apart from Wingspan, well, the most accessible game of ours is a game called Between Two Cities, which is one where you are competing against all the other players to build not one but two cities, and you're actually building those cities with the person on your left and the person on your right. But only the worst of your two cities will be the one that you actually get to score at the end of the game. So it's one of these games that requires really good communication between these two people that you are ultimately competing against. And it's a very easy game to learn. So that's one that I recommend for beginners.
Yeah.
And then Viticulture is a game of ours that has done very well for people who love wine and love even just the idea of running a farm or a vineyard, but in abstract board game form. Viticulture has done very well with that audience.
Yes, we've heard of that one. That was one that we were looking into, because like I said, we are branching out and we are going to be doing some videos, some review videos and stuff like that. So as well as doing what we're doing on the radio. So it does get everything out there. I think one medium feeds another, as you'll know yourself. So you do these type of things. You're on YouTube regular, aren't you?
I do, yeah. I love to talk about the different games that I'm playing, just to share my favorite. I'm not a reviewer, but I like to talk about my favorite aspects of those games as I learn from other designers and other publishers.
Yeah. It's kind of like sharing your knowledge, and that then it leads to other avenues. It opens doors. Being generous and giving your time opens doors. You meet new people in that way. We're going on to a bit of a business talk here and not board games.
No, you're right. Yeah, the people that I follow on social media are those who typically often talk about the things that they love or the things that they're excited about. That's fun for me to follow. And so I try to add that same love and excitement when I talk about other games that I'm playing and other methods, other strategies that other companies are using. Yeah.
So what game are you playing at the moment? Is there any special game?
What did I? Well, I'm not playing. Well, I played a bunch of games over the weekend. What did I play? I played a game called Isle of Cats, which is a wonderful. It's a little hard to describe, but you're basically you're going to an island and you're saving cats from this island. And the cats are little Tetris-shaped tiles that you're trying to fit onto your boat. I have 2 cats, and so I love cats. I love cat-themed games, and so we had a lot of fun playing that one over the weekend.
We've got a Bengal cat. We have.
You do? Oh, wow.
A parrot and 2 dogs. One's a Basset Hound and one's a Border Collie. And
do they all get along?
The Basset Hound's here now. I'm having to stroke him for keep him quiet because he can be a devil. So, but it's been fantastic talking to you.
Yeah, same to you.
And having you on the show. So hopefully we can have you on again and we can have another talk.
Absolutely. That would be wonderful.
So that was Jamie from Stonemaier Games in conversation with Are You Bored? And if you enjoyed that episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, the usual stuff, and we'll have more content for you soon.